Hello, welcome back to another edition of Sector 2815. I'm Paul Cook, and coming up, we'll talk to the man behind Automatic Comics. Ryan is coming up right after this. Welcome again. I'm Paul Cook, and we're going to be talking with Ryan from Automatic Comics. But before we get started, if you wouldn't mind giving me a like and subscribing if you're so inclined, and then also hit that notification button so that you're notified when new content is uploaded. I am so happy to have on my show this week a man who's Automatic Comics in YouTube and Instagram and eBay. It is Ryan. Welcome, Ryan.
Hey, yeah,
how's it
thanks
going?
for having me on. Yeah.
Oh no, thank you very much. Thanks very much for coming on. Before we get started, I just want to thank you, because when I was starting out my channel, I reached out to you and said, "Hey, can you give me any tips about any YouTube tips that'll help?" And you told me three very important things. The first was you got to put out content. Doesn't matter how many eyes are looking at it, you got to put out content. Don't be concerned, especially at the start. Don't be concerned with how many people are viewing it. Two, you told me that the thumbnail and the title are almost as important as the content, because they're the thing that really draws people in.
If nobody clicks, then nobody will know if you have the best content in the world.
Exactly. And my first two videos were just titled, Sector 2815 issue 1. It's like nobody knows what that is. So I started changing that up. And then the third thing you told me was tell people what you're going to do in like the first 15 to 30 seconds, because you related to me that you had watched another YouTube video about a guy, I guess, who was unboxing like $70,000 in comics.
Yeah,
and like
it's crazy.
The first,
I was going to mention that. I was like, yeah, it's like, I mean, he had like an AF-15 in there and the land variant of Edge of Spider-Verse 2 and just like all this stuff. But he opened up where he was just going through new comic book day books for like, it was like a 15-minute video. And the first like 11 minutes were new comic book day books. And then he's like, oh, and I got these books too. And it's like, he's like, AF, like just pulling all this stuff out. And I'm like, holy crap, that is like $60,000 in comics that he just opened in like 3 minutes. And nobody knows it. Like if he would have had like something like that in his like description or on the thumbnail, it would have gotten way more views. We've gotten more subscribers on his channel and everything. And people want to be like, holy, like this guy's got some sweet stuff. But you would have no idea if you didn't stick through. And if you look like after you've been on for a little while, YouTube gives you like metrics and stuff, and you see like a lot of people drop really quick. You need to make sure people know that something's coming up.
Yeah, exactly. Before we get started, just want to see who's in the chat. Of course, our good friend Jake from Omega Red is here. He's taking all the credit for everything that you do to start.
That's what he likes to tell me.
Thanks for tuning in, Jake. We appreciate you. So why don't we just get started? Just kind of tell us how you got into comics.
I mean, so actually my story, I would say, is relatively similar to Kevin's from Superpower Review, where I have two brothers, but I have an older brother, and he got into, at first it was baseball cards, that kind of thing. We had, cards, and we just like trade them with each other. And then he started getting into comics, and you just kind of do what you do. You kind of copy your older brother. And we had a local shop called Collector's Corner that we went to, and we'd go there and just had a pull list and that kind of thing, and would always just look through the boxes. And usually I was looking for Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man was always the one that I was collecting the most of when I was a kid. It tended to usually be like Bronze Age type stuff. Is that what I like to get? Mm-hmm. And and so from there, it was probably from when I was like 8 or 9 until I was about maybe 17 or so. I was buying books and that kind of stuff. Then, what happens, you go off to college and the collection just sits in the closet. And I didn't really come back to it until after I graduated from grad school. And so it kind of started with, I have a friend that I work with, and he's really big into comics and reading and everything. And so he was giving me some books. And so that's I'm not a huge comic reader. I'm much more of like just like a collector of the books.
Yep.
But he gave
Okay.
me Walking Dead and Invincible and Why the Last Man. And I've got like a bag of other books like back here. Like he gives me like stuff like this to read. And I tell him, I'm like, these books have traveled like all over the place. Like whenever I go on trips, I always bring them, and I hardly ever read them, but they get to see like St. Croix and things like that when we travel. And but so I started reading those, and that kind of got me into a little bit. And then I started talking to my older brother about it, and I told him about Invincible, like how much I love that. I love Invincible. I think it is just awesome. And so I was very excited about the TV show. So I told him about that. And then my brother started getting into it again, and he started reading Saga and all this kind of stuff. And so my brother got back into comics really heavily, like 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. And then like maybe 3 years back, my comics were at his house because my dad had threatened to throw them all out. And so we were like back over Christmas, and my dad's like, I'm throwing these, if you don't get them out of here, they go in the garbage. And so my brother took them because I didn't have room in the car. And so he brought them like 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And I started looking through them again. I'm like, and it just, I don't know, you just get interested in this stuff again. And then I was like, well, I have some money now. I can buy like the books I wanted when I was a kid. And so I started doing that. I started, just looking on eBay, and then started asking my brother, like, where can I buy comics, and learned about like Comic Link and Comic Connect and Heritage and all that. And I just started buying comics. And then I realized like I couldn't buy all the comics I wanted because they all cost too much. And so that's when I started getting into selling, whereas I'm like, at least I can like have some of these comics some of the time, and so whether I'm keeping them long term or I'm passing them on after that, it's like, it's just, I mean, it's cool. It's fun opening like this different stuff almost because I'm always buying stuff. So it's almost every week. I was telling Jake, maybe I think it was like the other day, I was like, this is one of the few times I actually have 0 boxes in my house right now. Like I usually have boxes that I'm like getting ready to open, but there are none right now. I had one that I just opened that I had I had a video I posted today on a trade that I did.
Right.
Yeah. I don't have no boxes in the house right now. It's very sad.
They'll show up. They're probably somewhere in transit right now.
Heritage has one coming to me. I'm always giving them money.
So what's the first comic book that you can remember ever reading? Or
for me, it would probably be Ghost Rider, though, because the Amazing Spider-Man I didn't read very often, but I loved the the version 2 Ghost Rider run, the one that started in like the 90s, and so I have probably maybe like the first 20 issues or 25 for that. I just always bought all those, so I definitely was reading the Ghost Rider issues, but I was also a very, very stereotypical 90s collector, where you're like, it's like, this is going to be worth $1 million, and so I have like the multiple copies of X-Men 1 and, every cover and all the X-Force books with the cards in them and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, yeah, they may be worth like $5 now or 10 or something, but they're definitely not the retirement money that we were all hoping. But yeah.
And now your current collection is about 50 comics that you can. Is that? I thought I saw somewhere you keep 50 comics.
Yeah. So basically, I generally have more than that I'm selling, but what I keep in kind of like what I would call like your PC or whatever you want to call it, my not for sale list, I keep that at right around 50 books. Sometimes it inches above, if I'm struggling with if I want to get rid of one of them or not. Earlier this year, it got up to like 100, and I was like, geez, this is too much. I'm like, there's too many here. And I went through the list and I was slashing, and deciding which ones I wasn't going to keep. And it's hard to sell some of those because like one of them I just sold was my 9/8 252 newsstand. And I had wanted that book for a long time. And I was just like, but I started comparing it with these other books that I had. And I was like, it's not making the cut. And so I'm like, all right. And so I ended up selling it. And, but I mean, the other side of it is it's what allows me to constantly be buying like
Sure.
new cool stuff. Like, because a lot of, I mean, that's one of the reasons I really ended up being able to get into things like Golden Age is if I had just stuck with the books that I normally would buy, I wouldn't have like tried out, like these different types of books. And the thing I've really realized for me is I don't really know how much I'm going to like a book until I have it in my hands. Like I could think I'm really going to like a book and then it shows up and I don't feel anything for it. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'll sell that one. Whereas other books, like that's why like the old Batman books have really like I've ended up liking. And the one that I probably had the Batman 251 up there is actually the first book that I got when I was like, that book is awesome. Like this
Yeah,
book is
I mean
awesome.
I mean the classic cover with Neil Adams.
Yeah.
It was the reemergence of the Joker as really kind of a sadistic, evil person from his kind of
Mhm.
jokey, 50s and 60s.
Yeah, not just a clown,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. By the way, I want to circle back. You mentioned Why the Last Man, one of my favorite titles ever. Going to be on Hulu September 13th.
Oh, is that
It's a
one?
series.
I knew
It's
it
a
was. I knew
series
it was
now.
coming
Yeah.
out. I didn't know what the plan was for it though. I wasn't sure exactly when it was coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No.
FX on Hulu.
Yeah, I know that has gotten really expensive. I don't want to subscribe to Hulu though. I've already got so many streaming services. I don't need to pay for another one.
But now I saw that your number one book that was in your collection, according to your video on YouTube, was Wonder Woman number one, right? That's for sale now.
Well, that's my number one most valuable book,
Okay.
not my
Okay.
number one like keeper book. So
Okay.
actually, if on my 50 keepers list, that is not on the list.
Okay.
And so my number one book that I have, I would say, is my ASM one.
Okay.
That was the book that, I mean, and it's a 0.5. It is not great, but it's complete, which was very important for me for 0.5. And I actually, I think let's see. So Comic Book Investments, I don't know if you ever watch his channel. He was talking about this recently. And I think it's something where there's definitely where you can see a difference with how CGC and CBCS grades. The big difference is at the bottom. And so I think I generally like and agree, not going to say like, I agree more with how CBCS grades at the bottom, because I think CGC is a little too harsh. Like to me, if a book is complete, like, and it's all there, there's no big pieces missing, I don't think it should be a 0.5. I think it should be at least a 1. And but in CBCS, I know if I crack that book out and send it to them, I'd get a 1 or a 1.5. But at CGC, I know that book is a 0.5. And so it's just, that's where you really do have to understand how the different companies grade to really get like what you're, to understand what you're getting with each of them. But for me, that book, that was the first book that I opened, and I just couldn't stop smiling when I had it. It was actually the first box I filmed opening, and I wasn't filming it for YouTube or anything like that. I was filming it for my friend that gives me these books. I was like, hey, I picked up this awesome book, and I sent him this video. He didn't know what it was. And so, so that was, that's kind of what almost started me filming things. And that hadn't been an idea to like post videos yet then, but that was the first thing that I filmed opening.
Right. I'm a big believer in that, a low grade is better than no grade,
Yeah.
So.
I mean, especially when books get as expensive as they are, I mean, sometimes it's all you can do. Like I have not broken into that 5-figure mark yet, but there's some books that like you almost can't buy now unless you're willing to, like X-Men 1, Fantastic Four 1, like they're, even the lowest grades are getting close to that $10,000 mark.
Yeah. And you have such a diverse collection of the things that you collect, or the things anyway that you bring in, that you buy. I mean, you have Golden Age, obviously, Marvel, DC, Silver Age, Bronze Age. You have the pre-code horror that you've been showcasing a lot of those lately. Is that something that really kind of lately has kind of piqued your interest?
Well, I mean, the pre-code horror, there's certain ones I like more than others. Like I don't. It's hard to really say. Like the ones that are done by like LB Cole. So some of those Golden Age, like famous artists, I do really like those. The ones that are kind of like especially gruesome aren't really something that I'm really into. I mean, I do have one of those. I have a Crime Suspense Stories 22, which is the beheading cover, and
Okay.
that one I don't think I would get rid of. I know my friend he knows if I ever upgrade it, I think if I sell it to anybody else, he'll unfriend me. So I know he wants that book. Every time I see one come up for sale, I message him. I'm like, hey, there's but the problem is like they've gotten really expensive. Like the ones I've been seeing come up for sale are like 4 5s, and they're selling for like $5,000. And he's like, that's not what I'm looking to spend. But yeah, I mean the pre-code horror part of it is because I as a seller of books, I know there's a huge demand for it. So that's one reason. The other reason is just I think the pre-code stuff that drove the Comic Code Authority is just I don't both the good girl art side of it and like the horror side of it. I think it's such a cool just thing. That's what really got me into the good girl art type covers. I never thought that would be something I would be collecting, but I don't know. They're some of my favorite ones. Like Phantom Lady 17 is like it may be my top tier book that I want to get, other than accept maybe Batman 1 is probably number one on my list. But that's another book where I'm like, unless you're willing to spend like $30,000, you're and that's for a restored copy, you're out of luck. And I'm not really looking to spend that much money on a comic.
Yeah. And, I think back sometimes about, if it wasn't for, Frederick Wortham and, the congressional hearing and all that stuff, what could have been through the 50s and the 60s, how much the creativity was kind of like stunted because of that,
Yeah. I mean, I guess you never really know. I mean, it wasn't too long of a period before we started getting back into superheroes. So it's possible that that's what really triggered superheroes to come back. So it may have been even longer before we saw Flash, in Showcase 4. I mean, so that it's possible that ended up having that type of effect on it. You'll never know. It's impossible to know what would have done it. I mean, unfortunately, we had those like a few years of a lot of like Westerns and romance.
Jerry Lewis and Bob Hope comics and Dobie Gillis.
Because like to go along with that, I mean, there was a book I just recently picked up, which was the Captain America 76. Sure. And so I think the interesting thing with that one is it had stopped a few years earlier with 75, and then they tried to bring him back, and it's just like country wasn't ready for superheroes yet. That was 1954, I think, when that one came out. But then just 2 years later, in 56, then Flash is a big hit, and then you start to have superheroes come back. So it's strange how certain things, came about and took hold.
Yeah, and it was big. I mean, a lot of things switched to science fiction at that point. A lot of the Flash and Green Lanterns and Tommy Tomorrow and all those good things, Space Rangers, and so I mean every decade has its focus. But I really do think about what could have been if not for those hearings and everything. So let's talk about your video that you do at the beginning of the week where you go over the heritage auctions. I'm thinking that has to take you a fair amount of time to do everything that you need to do to do all the research, get everything done for it. So go a little bit into that.
Yeah, it's definitely not a short amount of time. We were touching on this in the back, and I was saying, I mean, total, I think between pricing books and filming and editing and the like putting together what I want to talk about and picking the books I want to talk about. I mean, I would say it's 10 hours, maybe 12 hours, something like that. And so it's not a small amount of time, but I mean, it serves multiple purposes for me as well. And that's part of why the idea kind of came to me, because when I started the channel, it was just like, I'm buying a lot of comics, and I have a lot of stuff that maybe people don't normally see, like the Golden Age stuff and a lot of like the older keys. And so I was like, I was just started off with unboxings. I mean, most of my videos were just unboxings at the beginning. I think I had one where I did a video on how to package books, and that was after I'd received some damaged books. So I was like, I should make this video. But then, eventually I felt like I needed to try to put something else, add something else to the channel. And I was trying to think of what else I could do that I do maybe differently than what other channels have. And I know that I put all this time in every week pricing books. And I don't know, how many other people might do that, but I spend a lot of time doing it. And it's like I said, it's a dual purpose. I do it to help me buy books, but then I was like, there's a lot of data here that I could maybe present, and it could give me a picture of what's going on in the comic market, and kind of a good idea, get a picture of what those crazy high sales are that happen, as well as the ones that are really low, that are like kind of surprising on the low side. And so since I was doing that already, it felt like a kind of a good transition, something I could add in to the channel. And it generally seems like people enjoy it. I mean, I kind of take it as part of the reason I like showing some of these older books like that is part of that is it has to do with kind of like what Gerber did with his books that he put out, where I always have those right here. So these these books here that are
Yep.
like these photo journals that have, the interior is like just page after page of like every single Golden Age book. And part of the reason why he made them was that a lot of those books were so rare that even though people might want them, they started losing interest because nobody ever saw them. There was never anybody that actually saw those books, so there's no demand for the books. And so, he puts this out there, and so then people can start to see these things that are out there and available, and it increased demand for Golden Age books. And so I kind of think of it the same way. I'm like, if people don't know that some of these books are out there, maybe they don't know that it's actually something that they might be interested in trying to get. And so that's where, like, I follow somebody on Instagram called Comic Book Nerd Girl, and she has some really cool books. And one of the ones she had was this Suspense Comics 11, which is an LB Cole book where it has this devil on the cover, and he's like dropping money over people, and they're like fighting for it. And I was like, that cover is awesome. And so then it just happened to be like 3 weeks after I saw that, somebody listed one on Elite Comics 11, and I was like, mine. I was like, I claimed, and I don't know if I've ever seen one listed since. I mean, they sell, there is one that's coming up in the Heritage Promise Collection auction in September. It's a 9.8. And so I have no idea what that book is going to sell for. But I mean, it's stuff like that where you see these books and you're like, I didn't even know that book existed. And then I started looking at other books that LB Cole did. And, you start to get interested in these other things. And that's why what I've collected has really changed over the last couple of years, because I'm probably maybe a little different than a lot of people that have maybe been continuously collecting for 15 or 20 years. I'm back into it within the last 2 to 3 years. And so I'm seeing a lot of things I'd never seen before when I was a kid. Like no comic shop has that on the wall, it's so, or unless it's like Torpedo or something. And so, I'm seeing all these different books, and it's changing what I'm really interested in, because I didn't know what I might be interested in. And so that's what's really fun about buying all these different books and being able to see what's out there.
Jake wants to know that he just watches you. He's taking up street boxing, which which tells us why he's not doing that for a living. So, thanks, Jake. Yeah, but I mean, to his point, it's you provide an invaluable service to the rest of the comic community too. And so on behalf of the comic community, I know I told you this beforehand, but thank you. So as you watch the market, do you see the market pulling back a little bit now?
I mean, definitely. Prices have definitely come down, but so I was watching ETA Nick's channel. I don't know if you ever watch him or not, but so as somebody who is like an invaluable resource for learning to grade books and learning how to press and clean books, if you want to get into that, ETA Nick's channel. He can be a little grumpy sometimes. So as long as you can kind of like look past that. But like in one of his recent videos, he's like, if somebody tells you that the market is crashing or dropping and they don't talk about where the prices were a year ago, he's like, I would bitch slap them, and I was like, I don't want Nick attacking me. So, right. but no, but I always make sure I talk about that, because I think that's important to know, that that yes, prices might be dropping 10, 20, 30, even, it could be dropping 50%. It doesn't matter really in the grand scheme of things, because they are up 200, 300%. And so they have to drop 70, 80% to even get back to the baseline of where they were before. And so, yeah, I mean, prices are definitely dropping some in most keys, but they're still up. Generally what I'm seeing is, anywhere from like 75 to about 150%. And there's exceptions to that. Some are up more and haven't really retreated and that kind of thing. But in general, yeah, it's like, it was like this, then it went like this, and now it's kind of like this. And I generally have been seeing the ones that started to drop earliest, like X-Men, they really are starting to level off. It seems like they basically, if like this was our baseline before, we've moved up to like a new baseline kind of up here.
And, and it all depends on what your outlook is. Are you in it for the long haul? Excuse me.
Oh,
if you're investing, or are you in it, to try to flip a book right away? If you're trying to flip a book right away, then yeah, exactly.
If you bought in May, and paid like the high in May, it probably hurts a little bit. But the other side of it is that if you're looking to flip a book quickly, yeah, that probably sucked for you. Like that. But if you were, always kind of like buying conservatively, which is what I do. I always give myself buffer because I'm always just cautious of that. Or if you're just planning to hold on to the book anyway, doesn't really matter. Like any of the books generally that are like back on my shelf, I don't care what they do. It's like they can go up or down. I'm not selling them to anybody anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference to me.
Yeah, and I think and I think the one to me anyway, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the things to me that would be volatile, I think, are the things that are tied to specific things. I'm thinking the first appearance of Taskmaster, right? That went way up, right? But now I think it's come back down now that the movie's come out, and maybe people weren't as thrilled with Taskmaster as they thought they were going to be.
And I just saw some news that they're thinking they might bring that character back again, and so it's like, you never know. I mean, my general recommendation on the channel is if you like a book, that's fine. I mean, that's the thing. Like, if you like a book, you should buy the book, and then you won't ever have a problem with whether it goes up or down.
Right.
But if you are concerned about long-term value of a book, you probably shouldn't invest in villains, with a few exceptions. You know, and I wouldn't say Taskmaster is one of those exceptions. Like it's. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that character's cool, but that's not like a household name character. Whereas even, and I've talked about this with Jake. So even Thanos, does not meet that criteria. Like the person that's gonna have to meet that criteria is like Doctor Doom, or Magneto, which is already in X-Men 1. And so because like Thanos, I was talking with Jake about how the prices have moved, because we were talking about that in comparison to like Avengers 8. And because that book, when they first showed, I was looking at the history a couple days ago with this, when they first showed him, that book jumped like 4x. It was like $150 book and like an 8.5, it jumped to like $600. And then over the next like 5 years, it just kind of like gradually trickled up to around, I think, like 1,100 or so. And then when they killed him off, that book tanked back down to 650, where it had jumped up to 5 years before, or it would have been like 8 years before at that point. And so it's just, it shows you like you even some of the most popular villains, like once they've served their purpose and they kill that character off, the prices they're gonna go down. Like Ronan the Accuser, like that was one, like like Fantastic Four 65, that book just straight down after he was killed. And even though he showed up again in Captain Marvel, it didn't really matter. But
so what you're saying is that the 30 copies that Jake has of Onslaught's first appearances may not be worth that much.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, and that's the thing. Like that's why I always say, like, yeah, buy what you like, so it doesn't bother you if they drop. But if your long-term heroes are generally they're generally, because they're always around, they keep them around. So
the thing that I like personally is DC Silver Age and Golden Age. Good time to buy them now, or
I mean, that's the tough thing with DC. Yeah. Jake likes Thanos because he just bought an Iron Man 55 recently, so so that's why he is a big fan of Thanos. But that's always the problem with DC. It always looks undervalued, and I feel like, and this is coming from a person that buys DC books. I just unless I mean, I know people don't like to think that the movies are what really drive prices. I mean, there are general demand will move prices on books, but having books out in front of characters, out in front of people's eyes, that's what does it, and making people connect with them. And so, like Black Widow, like her books weren't worth anything before she became an Avenger and Avenger in the MCU. And so same kind of stuff. Like if DC could start consistently producing content that got people really interested in those characters, I'm sure they could grow like Marvel. But I mean, they've come up in the last 6 months like everything else, but a DC book maybe moved up 50% when a Marvel book moved up 150%, and so I mean, I know I've talked to people, and there are people that do think DC is what you should be buying right now. I don't know. I don't really, I buy it because I like it. I don't necessarily buy it because I think there's like a long-term, future for it.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm with you. I think people who don't think that the spike in Marvel comics doesn't have anything to do with the MCU. I think in some ways they have their head in the sand, because it's because that's what it's all supply and demand. What drives the demand is people see them on the screen. They say, "I want to know all about this character. Give me everything you can about this character," and that's how they get to the books. So,
and that's why I always like one of my general like rules I like to follow with that is I always like to buy the earliest appearance of that character. Like and so an example is like Monica Rambeau with Amazing Spider-Man Annual 16. Right. It's like she had multiple appearances as different characters later on, but you never really know which one they're going to use. I mean, we're pretty sure now it's Spectrum, but you never know for sure. But it'll always be Monica Rambeau, know. And it's the same thing when people were talking about Val in what was it, Captain America and the Winter Soldier. When she showed up, and there were people saying like, oh, it's not that version that's in, it's like Strange Tales, I don't know, 158 or 156 or whatever it is. And they're like, it's this different version. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like, that's the first time you see her name, that's the one that people will always gravitate to. And so that's why I always like to kind of like, at least that's my recommendation usually is go for the earliest thing, that you can get of that character.
So you have a new comic reader. Let's say you have a new comic collector who doesn't have unlimited cash, but let's say, I mean, they have like $1,500. What would you suggest if they're just starting up a comic collection and they wanted to build it? Do you have a suggestion that you could give to someone that they want to, take a look to kind of build off of?
I mean, for the general recommendation would usually be first, if they have any idea of certain characters they like, then I would drive them towards certain books and that. But I usually say, and when I talk to my brother about this, is that like Spider-Man is king. In the comic world, Spider-Man books are king. And so if you want to have something where you're going to be confident in that book long term and how it's going to either maintain or, I mean, books can lose value, that can happen too, but lose less value than other books. Then Spider-Man is where I would go, and the earlier Silver Age issues, the key issues, whether it's the first about 15 or so, where you've got key villains that show up. Amazing Spider-Man 50 is another great one. 31 is a great one. Like those key books, that's probably where I would start someone at. And I would say I wouldn't put it all into one book. You can find a few and try to find some lower grade copies. I would usually say, if you're very new, I would probably recommend a graded book, because with the graded book, at least you don't have to know how to grade. That's actually, it's one of the most difficult things. And I learned this too, when I came back into comics. You cannot trust any grade that somebody puts on anything. It's not just eBay, it's anywhere. Do not trust a grade that someone puts on something, you need to be able to evaluate that book yourself. And that's not an easy thing to learn. I mean, I know people say they're like, oh, it's not that hard, you know, but they're probably not that good at graders. You know, but the thing is, like, the one thing that really helped me was that the fact that I buy so many graded books. I see all types of grades all the time, and so I can tell very quickly now what's approximately in a grade, and then you can kind of focus in on it a little bit. But at the start, I was buying stuff on eBay, and people would be like, "Oh, it's a 6.0," and I'm like, "Oh, it must be a 6.0," you know. And you buy it, and then like, once you learn like how to grade, you're like, "Oh man, that was not a 6.0." It's like I bought a Batman 181 early on, and you know, I at that point I didn't think to like do things like page counts, that kind of stuff. And a little later, once I started doing that and I checked the book, I was like, God, the centerfold is detached at the bottom staple, you know, and they never would put that in the listing, you know, and just things like that you really need to, if you're buying a raw book, there's a lot of stuff to check. I mean, there's concerns with the grade, there's concerns with the restoration, there's concerns with missing pieces and cutouts and all that kind of stuff. And it can be difficult if you're spending a lot of money. I mean, I was thinking about making a video about it and I didn't, but there were a couple sales recently where I don't really blame the seller. They put a grade on it, you know, and their grade was way too high. You know, one of them was like an FF4 and they had it at a 6. That book was not anything more than a 3.5, but it sold for about a 6 price. And that's the thing where people are just blindly following what someone puts on there. And there was another one that I can't remember which book it was. They had it like an 8, but and it looked nice, but if you flipped open, they had plenty of pictures. So that's why I don't really blame them. Yeah, they put a grade on it and it's wrong, but they had plenty of pictures. The inside of the front cover, you could see a stain that was like this big, you know, along the bottom. And I'm like, nope, that book is maybe a 5. And so it's like, yeah, that kind of stuff. And probably more like a 4 or a 3.5, you know, and so it's like people will pay that price, not realizing that that's the impact that those things have. And you can lose a lot of money doing that. And so that's why with a graded book, at least you can get a service like Cover Price or Go Collect or GPA or whatever it is. You can at least have an idea what that book is worth. And so, you know, you're at least paying approximately the right value.
Right.
Yeah.
He's never once burned by online graders. I would direct people to his latest podcast.
No, I feel bad.
Yeah. But to your point, I know you mentioned Kevin from Superpower Review. He's adamant, like he doesn't send stuff to CGC. He buys graded copies all the time for a couple of reasons. One, because he knows what grade he wants, but two, he knows that the copy he's getting is going to be the grade that he wants. So you know, he just buys graded books.
And I mean, I know certain people have views on, you know, like, oh, there's, you know, maybe it's off by this much or this much. It's like, but regardless, it's close. You know, it's like if you're buying an 8 and you have an argument, it's like, oh, is it a 7.5 or an 8? It's still like, it's either a 7.5 or an 8. It's not like it's a 2 or something like that. So, I mean, every once in a while you do see these books that get misslabbed and they definitely have the wrong grade on there. But, that was a video ETA Nick did as well recently where it looked like somebody fat fingered in his grade. And it was a Spider-Man, or not Spider-Man, it was a Star Wars 1. And he thought it was going to get a 9.4. And it came back a 4.0. And and he was like, there's no way this is a 4.0. And he sent them pictures and they're like, we would like to reevaluate your book. And so they gave him a free shipping label. He sent it back to them and they came back and it was a 9.6. You know, and so that is why, like, even like that is rare. I mean, I will say that, like, I don't want to put say oh, you can't trust graded books or anything like that. That is rare. If you see something that's really, really wrong, then that's probably, you know, a mistake that happened. But in most cases, like it's going to be approximately the right grade.
Yeah. The thing I would wish was, I mean, I kind of almost always use CGC, but the thing that I wish that they would do is I wish that they would give grader notes for every single comic that's less than a 9.8. Like I
Yeah,
have one
and
that
I know
kid.
that's what CBCS does. Like
Yeah,
that is a big positive for CBCS that they do that. My side of it, like if the only I guess the only reason I could really say that would be if you thought there was maybe a mistake. But
mhm,
otherwise, if I'm getting a book graded to sell, I don't really care what the grader's notes are. You know,
right,
that's where, like, if I'm sending a book in to sell, like if it comes back whatever it is, fine. That, you know, that's what it is. It doesn't matter to me if it has a color breaking crease or a bend or whatever. You know, it's like fine. You know, that's what it is. But I do understand that a lot of people do want to get those graders notes in so that they can at least get some type of confirmation. And I think it also would potentially help people learn to grade. You know,
right.
if you see the types of things that they're marking, because at least the CBCS graders notes, they're actually pretty thorough. Like
Mhm,
they tend to look pretty, you know, they're very complete and give you a good idea what's going on. The CGC graders notes, even when they're there, are not not
yeah,
great. So I don't, even if you have them, they don't add a lot of value.
right. Like I know. I mean, and what I was probably was specifically referring to was when they give something a 9.6 versus a 9.8. I would like to know, what made you bring it down, because
Mhm.
although they're still both considered, near mint or whatever, the price, if you're doing it to flip books or whatever, the price between the 9.6 and the 9.8 can be, you know,
Oh yeah, I
pretty
mean,
hefty,
regardless of the book, I mean, I mean, especially with moderns. I mean,
right?
moderns, it's almost 9.8 or bust. You know,
Right,
it's
right.
but then that's why so many people do those pre-screens now,
Yep.
because you know, like if you're sending in a book and it comes back a 9.6 and it's worth $35, that's basically what it costs you to slab and
Right.
ship the book. And so what's
Mhm.
the point?
Exactly. So one thing that I ask everybody who comes on is, when you die, you can be buried with one book. What book would you be buried with?
So yeah, I was thinking about that, and I I don't know if I have that book yet. The one I would say would be my ASM one, but because
Yep.
that is definitely the book I have the most like connection to. It was my favorite character when I was a kid, and it was the book that just like really like I said, made me smile when I opened it. But I I feel like I'm too early on in my collecting, like getting back into collecting to be able to say for sure that that's what that book would be. I mean, I feel like at some point I'm eventually gonna move into some of those like other books like AF-15 and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And I don't know how I'm gonna feel about that book when if I ever do hold it, or like if I ever did get a Batman one, you know, I feel like that would be that would be the book, you know.
Hmm.
But right now I would say it's my Amazing Spider-Man one. It's definitely the book that's the way I would do it. It's like it's the top book on my top 50 that I have. It's my favorite, you know, my favorite book that I own. So it would have to be that book.
Hmm. Okay. I'm gonna actually. Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
All right, you're back. I was
I'm
like,
back.
did I drop? Or
No, no. I wanted to put you on full screen for a second, but then I realized that you can't hear me if I do that. I don't think so. Um, but I noticed you have some hats off to the right that to your right,
oh yeah.
that are Iron Man
Yeah.
triathlons. Are you a triathlete?
Yes. Yeah. My basically my two main hobbies are snowboarding and triathlon.
Okay.
And so that's where like my hats are. This is Jackson Hole, is my favorite place on the planet to snowboard. My other stuff is usually Banff, which is my second favorite place on the planet to
Okay.
snowboard. And so yeah, but yeah, triathlon is definitely um, my most time consuming hobby,
Yeah.
because like so for like the fulls for the full Ironmans,
Hmm.
I mean it's 20 plus hours a week
Right.
training, and I I'm not training for one at the moment, because a lot of races. I mean, they're starting up some races again,
Mhm.
but last year
Yeah.
everything was pretty much shut down. So I need to get myself back into race shape. So,
How did you get into triathlon? What made you say, you know what, I think I'd like to put my body through this every?
I used to do just a lot of weightlifting.
Okay.
So back when I was in undergrad and grad school, I had a buddy in grad school that I lifted with like 3 hours a day. And after a while, I was just like, I don't know what I can do with this. I'm like, I can lift furniture, I can help people move. And so I was like, I wanted something where I could like, it would help me be maybe like more active. And because like we had a dog and like take the dog running and that kind of stuff. And so we had a friend that had done an Ironman, and I was like, maybe I could give that a try. And I didn't start with an Ironman though. It was like I started with I did a sprint, and then but my first year I did a half Ironman, and it was awful. I remember thinking as I was doing it, like you see these people around you all like, because I was cramping up, and you see these people around you cramping, you're like, we paid hundreds of dollars to do this. I'm like, I'm suffering, and it just paid a bunch of money to do this. And the fulls, I mean, the full Ironman's like $1,000, just to register. And so it's like you're paying a lot of money to just suffer. So it's an interesting hobby, but I'm a very competitive person, and so that was the other reason I played competitive tennis when I was a kid. And I swam. And so I had the swimming background, so that helped. And so I was already a decent runner. And so I just needed to kind of get good at biking. And it's turned out biking is probably my best discipline. But yeah, so yeah, I got into triathlon, and I'm pretty fast. I'm usually like, I qualified for the half Ironman World Championships that I was supposed to go to in New Zealand last year, but they got canceled. Because nobody can travel to New Zealand right now. So hopefully I get to go again, but we'll see.
I was going to ask you what your favorite discipline was, but you just mentioned it. So
my favorite is running, but the one I'm best at is biking. Biking is painful though. If you're doing it right, it's painful. So.
Okay. And it's always swimming and then biking and then running, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Swimming is my least favorite, even though I'm fine at it, but it's just, I like the open water swimming. I hate swimming in the pool. It's so boring. It is really boring. So.
Oh. Do they do triathlons in a pool?
They do sometimes, but it's the training. For some sprints, they'll do like the swim section in a pool, but most of the time it's a outdoor body of water.
So do you have any on this? Well, I guess maybe you don't have any on the schedule yet. You said because ones have been canceled.
Yeah, no, I don't have any that I'm signed up for right now. We'll see how things go. I am not in shape to do a race right now. I need to drop a lot of weight, and that's one of the things my friends always say. I'm kind of a, I don't know, I'm kind of weird like that. I will drop all the weight in the year for the race, and then when it hits winter, I'll gain like 30 or 40 pounds, and then I'll drop like 40 pounds in like 2 months, and then I'll start my training again. And it's probably not very healthy, but it's kind of the result of just focusing on training for like 7 or 8 months straight, and then you kind of get like, after your final race, you're like, I'm done with this, and then you take a break for but you keep eating the same, and so you gain a bunch of weight. But yeah.
What do you have coming up on your channel? You have something coming from Heritage, you said, right?
Yeah. So that'll be in probably an unboxing video coming up pretty soon, but it's not here yet, so I don't know exactly when I'll film that. But I mean, so I like doing these this newer videos I've been doing, these top 10 ones. They're fun for me. I like doing those, so I'll do those generally weekly. I always like to do an unboxing video weekly if I have something. Like I said, I normally buy stuff each week, but it's very dependent on if I sell stuff, because if I don't sell anything, I don't have any money to buy stuff. So it is very dependent on that. If I don't sell anything, then there won't be any unboxing videos. But then I try to think of just a random other idea, for the week. I try to have 3 videos a week if I can. Mm-hmm. I will probably do a market video this week, if not next week, because I stopped doing them weekly because it's just like one point on the graph, and it's kind of hard to talk about that with one point on the graph. And so I'm waiting for kind of like a few points to build up so I can have something, more substantial to talk about. And so I've had 3 weeks of that. And so I might do a market video, but I like doing, there's some videos I've done, a few in the past, where I look at what I think are the biggest keys for either like X-Men or Amazing Spider-Man or Fantastic Four. Those are 3 I've done. I've been thinking about doing some other ones as well. And those are just kind of fun to look at what the books, those key books have done over the last year, and kind of gives you an idea which books at least appear to be undervalued. Like if you've seen these other keys move up 150%, but this one has only moved up 50%, maybe there's a lot of room there. And so that was one of my videos from, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 months ago. That's how I had picked out Daredevil #2, or I had seen Daredevil #1 had moved up just crazy. I mean, it had gone up, like 300%. Daredevil #2 hadn't done anything. And what I've seen with second appearances is they generally tend to sell for about 5 to 10 times less than the first appearance. And that usually holds true. And so if you get this like separation where it was selling for like 25 times less. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I think this book is going to go up. And so I was recommending, I was like, hey, you should pick up Daredevil #2. I bought a 7.5. And then it's actually kind of funny. My book was the one that was on Comic Tom last week, where they're like, a 7.5 just sold for $1,900. And I was like, that's my book. So I thought that was pretty funny when I saw that up there. But that was, I saw that big, discrepancy in price, and I was like, you should buy that book. And then that's kind of how I've made some decisions on. You were asking, I think, about like some speculation type stuff, and I'm not big on speculating. I'm generally not somebody who's gonna watch like a show and then try to dig into it and figure out like, oh, which books I should buy. I'm generally more, I'd call it like, I'm like a key like speculator. I'll just buy books that I think are important regardless, but I think have potential moving forward. And so that really makes it so I'm not taking much of a risk when I buy the book, because there's always going to be demand for that book. Whereas there may not always be demand for that White Vision, that West Coast Avengers. And so, but there's always going to be demand for, like Green Goblin, that kind of thing. And so if you think Green Goblin might be coming in the next Spider-Man movie, and you're like, I'll buy that book. And if he doesn't show up, that book's not going to tank. That book's still going to be one of the most desirable books of all of Spider-Man. And so that's what I like. That's what I kind of like to do if I'm trying to find books that are undervalued to pick up.
Yeah. I just lost my train of thought, but to your point, I mean, there are some blue chip, comics that just, no matter what will happen, you can guarantee that they're going to go up. And
I mean, I never guarantee a book will
right,
go. I mean, it's
absolutely.
possible books can go down, but long term, they will probably, they tend, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people that are like just getting into comics like this year think that this is maybe normal, what comics have done, and it is not. Comics generally follow kind of like inflation,
right?
That's more what you would see, like a few percent a year. And so, yeah, like if you're buying an AF-15 or something, it's like, yeah, maybe it's going to go up a few $100 each year. But eventually, if you had that book for 10 years, it's gone up multiple thousands of dollars, but that kind of thing.
Right. And we had, an influx of cash to a lot of people through the stimulus that was passed. And, people were getting money, but they weren't actually going out and spending it anywhere because everything was closed. So, people were looking to see, where can I spend my money? And then Blackstone bought CGC, which I think in a lot of ways would be good for the industry. I don't know how you feel about that. But the thing that I think it'll be good is because
not sure.
I think it lends credibility to the fact that comic book collecting is it's a real thing. It's not just funny books.
Yeah. I think it does make, I think maybe it makes it a little more, a little more mainstream, maybe is the word for it. But I would say, from a person who, if you're someone who's sending books in to get graded and that kind of thing, you may not like it, because I fully expect that they will. Their purpose is to make money. It's an investment firm. And so if they see a 6-month backlog and they're like, well, you know how you address that, raise prices, and
Right.
people were complaining about a few dollars, price
Right.
increases. You could start to, and that was when prices hadn't moved for 5 years. Like
Right.
that's why I thought the complaints were kind of ridiculous, because I mean, they were slowed down. I get it that people are upset that they raised prices when they were taking a long time to process, but they had kept prices flat for years. No business does that.
Right.
And so I think you could easily expect that with Blackstone being involved in management, you could potentially have price increases yearly.
Right.
And I would not be shocked if that's what happens.
Yeah, because to your point, they're in the business of making money, and how you make money is you either increase your market share, you increase your prices, or you cut your expenses. Those are pretty much kind of the three ways that you make, that you
Yeah.
increase, that you prop up the bottom line. And I don't see them increasing prices right away, obviously, because they just did it. So I think that would not be. But I could see where they might try to cut some people that maybe they were thinking of hiring. And I think, I personally think that CGC is going to really test how long people are willing to wait to get their books back.
Well, there was some interview I saw recently. I can't remember which channel it was on, where they interviewed, like, I think it was like was it the president of CGC or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, and and how he was kind of like proud of the long lines and wait times. He's like, it shows
Right.
that there's a lot of demand for their product, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's not what you want to hear if you're somebody who's sitting in that queue. You're like, oh, I
Yep.
thought they were going to maybe try to speed that up, but maybe not. It's. I mean, you can kind of see the perspective there. It's like kind of like a sign of prestige,
Right.
for that so many people are wanting their books graded by them, that there's a 6-month waiting period. So I don't know. I would hope it will get faster, but I'm not sold that it is going to get faster.
Yeah, I'm not either. So, um, we had someone who came in and wanted to know. Oh, that's me. Can you show the full design T-shirt you're wearing now with standing in full screen? Well, I won't stand, but um, basically, it's an Amazing Boy Wonder T-shirt. It's a parody of
Oh, okay.
Amazing Spider-Man number 50. I believe I got it. I think it's called Red Bubble. But if you just Google Amazing Boy Wonder T-shirt, you'll find it, because that's how I found it. So, but yeah, it was kind of cool. I liked it, so that's why I got it. So,
Cool.
so we're almost at the bottom of the hour. Anything else you want to talk about, or anything else you got to say?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just if you haven't checked out my channel, I would
Yeah.
love it if people checked it out, just because I do really like to show some of these less common books, and I've realized, because I see the views I get on different videos. Like, I know my golden age videos don't get as many views, but I still make those videos because I enjoy them. And I like showing those books.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're at all interested in that, maybe thinking that you might want to dip your toe into some of those types of books, the pre-code horror books, or just early superhero, that kind of thing, like, check out the channel. I'm usually showing at least a couple books like that in almost any unboxing. I'm usually picking up books like that. So, as well as just the general, Silver Age, Bronze Age keys, that kind of thing. Because that's what I buy. I mean, I'm not really like a run builder, that kind of thing. Like, I like to buy keys, and so that is what you will see if you watch my channel is keys.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's Automatic Comics, obviously, on YouTube. He's also Automatic Comics on Instagram, and your store on eBay is Automatic Comics as well.
Yeah, I use
right?
the same name everywhere. I just try to make it easy for people.
I should have listened to that when I was doing my my Instagram. So, well, I want to thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, you'll come back sometime.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
And again, if you're whether you watch this live or on the rewind, please smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you're so inclined, and then hit the notification button so that you get notified when we upload new content. So one more time, just thanking Ryan for Automatic Comics. And as of right now, you are now leaving Sector 2815. Have a great
See you
night.
later.